Hi, I'm Ria.
Hi, I'm Hayley, and together we are
Chronicles of a Spoonie,
sharing stories.
creating connections. So today we are actually interviewing our Hayley.
As always, we like to give a trigger warning for each of our podcasts. And for today, we will be discussing fertility, IVF, and medical procedures. If you are triggered by any of these topics, maybe this is not the podcast to listen to today, but please do return next time to listen to our next one. That being said, let's get started.
Hayley, would you like to introduce yourself?
So hi, yes, I am Hayley. I am 26 years old. I live in Northern Ireland with my husband and my 3 little sausage dogs who are under here at the moment. Hopefully they'll stay quiet. I am a software engineer, so I spend my days programming, writing code, and my hobbies include going out for dinner and playing some video games, arts and crafts with this one over here. And yeah, that's about it. That's about the most interesting things I can think about.
So what's the condition we're going to be speaking about today?
So I have endometriosis. It is a condition where tissue similar to the endometrial lining of your womb grows outside of the womb and around other organs, and it can attach to other organs, cause a lot of pain, inflammation, discomfort. Due to that tissue being the same, mostly the same in structure as what's inside your womb, it does the same thing every month in that it sheds, it bleeds. The difference is that there is nowhere for it to go. Your normal period will exit your body. The blood that builds up in the other areas where the endometrial tissue might be doesn't have anywhere to go. So it causes scarring, creates more links between other organs that it shouldn't be connecting to, and just causes a lot of pain and discomfort, really. So it's a very difficult condition to get diagnosed. It's I think on average at the moment it's about 8 years to get a diagnosis for it, and it's because so many of the symptoms are so ambiguous. They're just so completely vague. They could be any number of conditions, and a lot of the time people end up going down the wrong route of getting the diagnosis. First of all, a lot of the time it ends up going down like GI route of getting gut and intestinal health people involved, and some other times that it can go towards back issues, things like that. So it's a really notoriously difficult condition to actually nail down, and that's why it takes so long for people to get diagnosed.
I was reading recently, and as you know, because I was tagging you, Amy Schumer was recently diagnosed with endometriosis. And so finally, because some famous people are becoming diagnosed, awareness is now happening.
Yeah.
I can imagine when you were first having your symptoms that there wasn't really much known about it. So like, how did you know to go to the doctors? Like, what was happening for you at the time for you to go, do you know, something's really not right here, and you need to see a doctor?
So for me, it kind of started, so whenever I first got my periods, they were always really heavy and they were always quite painful. And the first time I spoke to the doctor about it, it was just a case of that, you know, I was just unlucky. This was just, you know, luck of the draw. I'd drawn the short straw, and I was just going to have painful periods. My mum had them, and it was just the way it was going to be. So at that point, it was really just a case of the doctor giving me painkillers to try and manage them.
Okay.
And nothing more was said about it at that point. It was just a case of, you're unfortunate, and that was it, move on kind of thing. So continued like that for a few years, and then I started taking the combined pill to try and help manage the symptoms with the heavy periods. So the reason for doing that was, with the combined pill, you can take it for up to 3 months solid and then have just the week break in there. So instead of just taking the 1 sheet and taking a week break, it would have been the 3 sheets and then a week break. So I was only ever having roughly 4 periods a year. So it was to try and sort of minimize how many I was having.
Okay, did that help? Did that reduce the pain?
It reduced the pain somewhat. I wouldn't say it eliminated the pain. It still meant that every 3 months essentially I was still having to go through that, go through the period, and the excruciating pain that came with it wasn't as bad, and obviously having them less frequently was ideal. So for me, that was strangely the best hormonal treatment that I had been on for endometriosis. At that point, I didn't know that's what it was, obviously, but strange. I say strange because the combined pill, because it contains estrogen, it can actually worsen the symptoms of endometriosis. It can make it worse because estrogen is what causes the tissue to grow and form, and you're pumping more estrogen into your body, so therefore you're encouraging that to grow.
Right.
So although it might have helped me with the symptoms at the time, for all I know, it could actually have worsened my condition or sped up the process of worsening my condition.
Wow.
So I was on those combined pills for a few years, and it was actually missed on a couple of reviews that I had mentioned that I'd got a couple of migraines. And for anybody who's been on the pill before, or even if you haven't, you maybe know that migraines are a big no-no when it comes to hormonal treatment like the pill, because there's a higher risk of clotting whenever you take a hormonal pill.
Yes.
So as soon as that you mention the word migraine, they should be shutting that down. They should be saying, no, you need to come off that, because it is, the risk's too high of a blood clot, basically, at that point.
Okay.
So at that point, they took me off the combined pill, and I chose for that sort of period of time to give my body a rest and just try seeing how I was without it, see if things had maybe settled down. Because again, at that point, I didn't know what endometriosis even was at that stage. I thought it hadn't even occurred to me. So, you know, the periods came back, they were painful, but I found at that point they were fairly manageable. I could continue with the painkillers that I had been given. And again, I was just thinking, this is how it's going to be for me. There's nothing I can really do. So yeah, again, probably another couple of years go past, and the next thing I really found was the back pain that started up for me. So that probably would have been about 2016 or so. So I was in my final year of university, and the pain, which turned out to be sciatica, just hit, and it didn't really seem to have a trigger. And there was no fall or anything that would normally trigger something like sciatica that would trap a nerve, or any inflammation that seemed to be obvious. And I'd been sort of brushed off by a few GPs at that point, saying, you know, it's just muscle pain, you're just blown out of proportion. You know, there's no trigger, so it wouldn't be anything serious. But they gave me painkillers again, so that they put me onto a stronger painkiller at that point, and it was to try and manage my symptoms. But they did say, we will refer you for an MRI, and they'll see if they can take a look and see if they can find anything up with any of your discs in your spine. So it took a while, obviously with the NHS, to get in for that MRI. So I went for that MRI that day and saw the consultant beforehand, and he said, can I just have a feel of your back first? So he did. I felt along my spine, very painful. But he basically said to me at that point, I don't think we need to do the MRI. You feel like, it feels like to me that you have a slip disc. So I don't think we need to do an MRI, so you can go home.
That was it.
And that was it. That was it. All you have to do is try and rest, do some physio, and your body should heal. So there was never actually any imaging or confirmation of that done. It was just by the doctor feeling my back that they decided, yeah, slip disc. So at that point, it was just physio to try and help. And the physio helped to an extent, but not really enough to, you know, eliminate the pain or make it manageable enough. And at that point, I'd missed, you know, the majority of my first semester, a final year, and a portion of the second semester too. So it was really debilitating. I thought, even just with the painkillers that you're on, the brain fog that comes with it, and just everything along that line, it was just really, it was a really hard time, actually, because that was the first time that I actually felt like I was unwell.
Okay.
There was something that hadn't been diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, that was the first point where I went, there's something not right here, and I'm going to need to fight to prove that there's something not right. And it was just figuring out how to do that. So
it's definitely not easy within the NHS as well to get them to listen and stuff like that.
Exactly.
I don't know if your doctors over there are the same as where I am. They have each doctor has a limit of money they can spend every month referring and stuff like that. So it's very hard to get things like hidden illnesses diagnosed, because they have to really think there's something going to be there to warrant them sending you. Is it the same situation over there? Like, do you struggle to get the basics done for you?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I've sort of been through a fair share of GPs, and I find that there's definitely ones that are willing to go the extra mile for you. And there were a few that did take me seriously. It was after speaking to a few GPs about my back alone that I found one that did take me seriously and said, we need you to go for an MRI. But yeah, as you said, completely the same kind of thing over here, where you just have to, you know, it's kind of luck of the draw whether you get a GP that's gonna listen on that day and just take you seriously and refer you for what you need. And you know, obviously there is budgeting, and I understand that, you know, they can't just refer anybody as they like, sort of thing. Right. So I get that there's restrictions there, but at the same time, whenever you're the only person that can advocate for your own health, you really need those GPs to be there to stand up for you and help you with what you need, because they're the first port of call for you. So they need to be the people that are actually listening, taking everything on board, and just saying, right, you know what, you do need that test, rather than just dismissing on the first instance. You know, it's
absolutely. So they've gone for this MRI. They've said no, they're not going to do it because they felt your back. They're going to send you for physio. And then things have obviously progressed where you're going, okay, something's still not right here. I don't feel right. What was your next step for them? Like you said, you had to really think about it and think about what you were going to do. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so once I'd had the physio, we'd done the course of that for a while. As I say, things had improved a bit with the back, but, you know, since that point of ending the physio, that sciatic has never really gone away. There's flare-ups, there's days where it's really not bad and it's completely manageable, it's fine, but there are days when it flares up. So at that point, I kind of think I'd just gone, okay, well, it told me it's a slip disc. There's probably not really much to worry about. It'll sort itself out in time. But the next real thing was sort of probably mid 2017 or so. I started developing a lot of bowel symptoms.
Okay.
So I think at this point, I probably had been put back onto a mini pill. So that was the progesterone, I can never say that, progestogen only. So the mini pill, same kind of thing, except it was just the month and a week off. I found that I tolerated it less. The side effects I found were worse for it. But I found along with that, I started developing these bowel symptoms, which I thought were to do with the fact that I was now on this mini pill.
Right.
So for me, it was, as soon as I would eat anything, it could be a spoonful, it could be a full meal, within 20 minutes, I needed to go to the toilet, and there was nothing that could stop. Like, I had to get to the toilet. And this was every single day, every single meal, multiple times a day, having to just run to the toilet. So I did start seeing the GP again about this and said, look, along with the back pain, I still haven't found a cause for that truly. And I'm now getting these bowel symptoms and I just can't manage it anymore. I'm avoiding foods because, you know, I'm scared of eating things. So it was a case of eat plain things because they were the only things that I could tolerate to a degree. So it was bread, it was clear soups, it was just really simple things that I knew wouldn't affect me as badly. So the GP then agreed, after doing some blood tests, that my inflammation marker levels were raised, high enough for him to warrant sending me for an emergency colonoscopy. So within a few weeks, I did have that colonoscopy appointment. So again, this was a GP this was a new GP surgery as we'd moved house. And he took me seriously from the get-go, and he was fantastic. So he did get me referred very quickly for the colonoscopy. So I went for that a few weeks later, and they didn't find anything in the colonoscopy, but I was in absolute agony the whole way through it. It was so painful. And they told me that it was completely clear. They had a letter then for me to give back to my GP, which basically said everything looks okay, but she tolerated it with difficulty. So it was really, really painful. They kept having to top me up because it was just so sore. But because nothing came of that, then it was just kind of oh, you just have IBS.
It's a very common response from GPs to people with any bowel conditions. If they can't figure it out straight away, it's IBS, and it's done.
Exactly. So because they'd ruled out those big ones, the Crohn's and colitis, they went, oh, well, we don't see anything obvious, so it's just IBS. So at that point, it was again, here's some peppermint tablets and here's some other medication to try and help manage the diarrhea side of things. And that was it, sent my way again, kind of thing. So again, that never really settled down. Now, at this point, that was a few years ago, at this point now, it has settled down to the point where it's just flare-ups, and I would have that, you know, flare-up of maybe a month or so, where I do anything I eat, I need to go to the toilet. But I have now eliminated some food groups because I know that they are real triggers for me. So I will avoid the likes of red meat, a lot of garlic, milk, anything really lactose. I tend to avoid those kind of food groups. And that does help. So I did do elimination diets after the colonoscopy and things to try and help find out what it was that was triggering it for me.
Yeah.
But during a flare up, it doesn't matter. Whatever you put in is going to come straight back out again. So
it's like, yes, for you.
Yeah. So that wasn't fun. I think that's the hardest part. And I know it's something we touched on in your conditions in your podcast about how until you have gut conditions or bowel issues, you don't realize how hard it can be to just go out and do simple things, because you're constantly thinking about where the nearest toilet is, how long you're going to be out for, am I going to be eating? Because if I am, I'm going to be with people, I'm going to need to disappear to go to the toilet, I'm going to have to make excuses.
Smell, sound. Yeah.
So that really took its toll, especially with work, being in the workplace and thinking, after I eat my lunch, 20 minutes later I would have to go to the bathroom and hoping and praying that nobody else would be in there at that point. Mm-hmm. So stuff like that was really tough with the bowel side of things, and I think it probably took the biggest toll on me.
Yeah, especially on your mental health, it's where it starts to really mess with you.
It really does. And then again, at that point I was sitting going, there is something else going on here. This isn't just IBS. And I kept saying, this isn't just IBS. I don't know what it is, but there is something more going on here. Mm-hmm. But nobody knew really where to turn to next. So it was a case of just trying to keep managing it at home.
So how long a period is this over? Like from starting to notice that you're in a lot of pain and speaking to your doctor from the first time to you've been diagnosed with IBS, and you just don't know where to turn now. Like what period of time is that over?
So that was probably, so I first went to the GP about my back in probably would have been early 2016. And the colonoscopy was done in 2018. So 2.5-ish years by the time I'd had the colonoscopy, I was told it was just IBS. But prior to that, obviously, with all the heavy periods and things starting from I was 13, so that's 13 years ago now. Yeah. So
it's a really long time to suffer without any specific diagnosis to tell you, because the one thing that you'll probably understand, one thing with chronic illnesses is you cannot cope until you know what it is. And the second you know what it is, all of a sudden all the puzzle pieces start dropping in together and it starts working. So when did those puzzle pieces start coming together for you? Like, what was the next step that really you kind of went, this is a path, this is the right path we're going down, I feel like I'm getting my answers now?
Yeah, so as you say, just as well with the, until you have that diagnosis, it drives you insane just not having it. And I think part of the reason for me was I was convinced there was something going on, but then I started doubting myself because the doctors were telling me there was nothing there. I was going, is it in my head? I'm making this up. Is this something that is caused by stress? Is this just anxiety? What is causing all these symptoms? So it wasn't really until probably about just over 2 years ago, whenever I did go back to the GP and started talking again about all the pain with the periods and with all of the sort of menstrual side of things. It wasn't until then, and I was having some abnormal bleeding, it wasn't until then they maybe started actually looking at the root of this could be something to do with your reproductive organs. So this is the first time that any of this had been mentioned to me. And I can't remember how I found it, but I just remember one day, I think I was just Googling my symptoms because everyone does it.
On Google?
I know it's happened a few times in this podcast. Everyone says that they have a good Google of their symptoms. Yeah. Who doesn't? But I think I was just Googling my symptoms and I saw this word pop up, endometriosis. I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that before in my life. Mm-hmm. So I clicked on it, and I think it was actually Endometriosis UK, the charity. It was their website, and they list the symptoms and things like that and how to get diagnosed. I just remember reading the symptoms and going, yep, tick. Every single one. And I think I was going back to my GP because I think they were organising a smear at that point because I was having the abnormal bleeding and a lot of pain and everything down there. They had wanted to do the smear because I was 24 at that point, so I was close enough to the 25-year mark for getting your first smear done.
Okay.
So they just decided we'll do it a few months early. There's no harm. So I went back in for my smear, and I did mention to her at that point, I've read about endometriosis, and it's something I never knew about before, and every single one of these symptoms fits me. Is this something that could potentially be explored for me? Because it was just too much of a coincidence with everything, for it not to be explored for me. So she did agree at that point. She said, yeah, we'll get this smear sent off, see if everything comes back okay. But in the meantime, I'll start a referral to gynecology. Now, unfortunately, it did have to be done as a routine referral. Even though I was having all these symptoms, they couldn't bump it. And I was in touch with that GP fairly regularly, actually, to update her, because things I felt were getting worse, things were progressing. And, a lot of the symptoms are very taboo with endometriosis, because it's a lot of private stuff. There's pain with intercourse, there's abnormal bleeding, as I mentioned, a lot of pain around ovulation. And because it's female health, we all know female health doesn't get talked about, as much as it should still. So they were very taboo things, and they weren't something I brought up often with the GP, because I just thought, from being told when I was a young teenager that this was just how I was, that was just me. But to have this GP actually listen to me and take me seriously, and I remember that one of the last times I spoke to her, I said, is there any way you can speed up this referral, because things are just getting so much worse. My IBS symptoms are getting so much worse. I was writhing around in agony after meals. It was just awful. And I remember Stuart saying to me, there is something wrong, because this is not like he would have seen me just curl up in the bed, bawling my eyes out, writhing around, because it was just so painful. And I was burning the stomach off myself with hot water bottles, blisters on my tummy from hot water bottles. And I just said to her, can this be sped up? So she pushed it forward as an urgent referral at that point. I think this was about 6 months after the referral, and I was told it could be 9 months. And she said, basically, the next port of call, if you find that your symptoms don't improve, is you just need to go to A&E, because there's nothing more I can do for you right now, because I can't push this referral anymore. I can process it as an urgent, but if they on the other end decide that you're not urgent, that's up to them.
Without meeting the patient, they get to decide if it's urgent or not. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Glad it works that way.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, feeling totally helpless and just not really knowing what I can do going forward. So it did come to it. I did end up going to A&E one day, just with how bad the pain was. And I will never forget the female doctor that I saw there, who was talking to me about my symptoms and what it was that was causing me so much pain. And her response was, have you ever considered getting pregnant? And that will always stick with me.
Okay, yeah, that's a good response. That's medication that I should take. Should you ask me if I was financially or emotionally ready to have a child? No, okay, just have one of those.
Her reasoning was that it would give me 9 months of relief, because I wouldn't be having periods for 9 months.
Sorry, I'm sorry, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And with that, I was sent on my way again.
That was it?
That was it.
Her response to your entering A&E in absolute agony was, get pregnant.
Yeah.
I have nothing to say to that. I legit have nothing to say to that.
Yeah. And it's a common thing. Now, from speaking to other girls and other women who have this, they have been told the same thing, that they will get relief if they get pregnant.
For 9 months, that's it. And then you have a baby afterwards to deal with if you weren't or was ready. I'm sorry. I'm fluffing my words because I am gobsmacked by that.
Mm-hmm.
Have a baby. It'll solve all your problems.
Baby. They do say that your hormones balance out after you've had a baby as well. So they believe that there is a possibility that things can improve for you as well once you've had a child. What, on the other end of the stick, it can also get a hell of a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no guarantee that having a child anyway is going to give you that relief. It could actually make things worse. Never mind the fact that it's incredibly irresponsible to recommend somebody has a child whenever the sole reason for it is to try and help symptoms instead of finding the root cause.
Right. And I know we're not at the end of the story yet to even got to the diagnosis, but because we're in this area of conversation anyway, does endometriosis cause problems for pregnancy? Does it mean that you've got more chance of, sadly I don't like to say this, miscarriage and complications? Yeah,
so that was another reason. After I got my diagnosis, that was another reason why that stuck with me so much that she said that, because with endometriosis there is an increased risk of infertility, and they can't tell you how likely that is until you try to conceive. I'm not sure, I don't want to speak on the miscarriages because I'm not actually sure if there's an increased risk of it or not, but I know there is an increased risk of infertility, so not even being able to get pregnant in the first place. And that can be down to a number of factors. I think it can be down to the actual uterine lining in itself. It can be issues with fallopian tubes or with your ovaries, depending on where the tissue's growing. So a lot of the time, I know we'll come on to it, that the recommended treatment, or, well, it's not really treatment because there is no cure, there is no true treatment for it, would be to have excision surgery. So that's actually just to go in there and try and cut away as much of the tissue as they can. And they usually say that's your best chance. If there is any possibility that there could be infertility there, that they will remove as much as they can, and that should help. That's your best chance.
Okay. So going from being in hospital in A&E, told to get pregnant, what's next? Because obviously you must feel so defeated by this point, because you've been waiting for a scan for over 6 months now. Your GP's told you there's nothing more they can do to push this through, and A&E is suggesting you have a child. Like, where do you go from there? Like, do you just wait?
So yeah, essentially I was very lucky in that the company that I worked for at the time offered private healthcare as a benefit, essentially, for working for the company. So it was heavily subsidized. We did pay towards it, but it was heavily subsidized by the company. So at this point, I was lucky enough, because I hadn't actually had the first appointment with the consultant through the referral. It was just an open referral. I was really lucky in that I got in on time with the health insurance to be able to get referred to see a consultant through them.
Okay.
It was a route that I had tried to go down before. Whenever I was going for my colonoscopy, I did ask about seeing a bowel consultant, and they said because my symptoms had started and I'd seen the GP before my insurance policy had begun, I couldn't go through with that with them.
Right. Okay.
So there's a lot of grey area and sort of red tape to go through with insurance companies sometimes. But I was really lucky. I managed to get in and see a consultant through them in a private hospital in Belfast. So when I first went to see him, we kind of talked through all the symptoms, everything basically I've talked to you about, and we walked through everything there. And his next protocol then was to say, we'll do an internal ultrasound. So lovely, really fun. Would recommend.
10 out of 10 on Trustpilot.
10 out of 10.
It's very uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable. So basically, from having that look, and what he could actually show me on the screen as well, which is really actually quite interesting to see at the same time, him showing me, what my ovaries looked like and things on this screen. So first of all, there were what he called a string of pearls, cysts over I think it was my right ovary. So basically all wrapped around it. He had said they weren't really anything to worry about, but they were going to check for polycystic ovaries. So that was one thing that they were going to do a blood test for. He noticed that the uterus wall was very thick, and that can often be an indicator for adenomyosis, which is the same as endometriosis, except that it's within the womb. So it's extra endometrial lining that's growing inside your womb.
So it's easy to detect?
From what I know and from what he told me, you can't officially get diagnosed with adenomyosis or adenomyosis unless you have a hysterectomy, and they do full biopsy and investigation once they've removed your uterus. So there's no surefire way to get diagnosed. They can look at scans and assume that you have it, but they can't actually give you a diagnosis until you would have a hysterectomy.
Can a hysterectomy cure endometriosis?
It can, but it doesn't always. So a lot of the time, women will have a hysterectomy and they will find that maybe their symptoms improve for 6 months, maybe a year, and all of a sudden it'll flare back up again on another organ, because it completely depends on whether all the endometrial tissue was removed from anywhere else in the body. And no surgeon can ever guarantee that they've got everything whenever they've been in there. If they've gone in for a hysterectomy, maybe they have gone in laparoscopically and they've removed endometrial tissue from around, I don't know, the colon, or the appendix, or even the lungs, because it can be thoracic as well, they can't actually guarantee that they have removed all of that tissue. So there's always potential for one, some of it to remain, and two, for it to grow back. So they say that that's the treatment. The best treatment you can get is to remove the uterus, and sometimes the ovaries as well. But it is never a guarantee that that's going to cure things for you.
Okay.
So yeah, so he saw that on the scan. Again, he said it could be that, but we can't prove it unless we were to do a hysterectomy, which obviously he wasn't going to do at my age. And then he said what he could see sort of external to that did look like there was maybe some tissue elsewhere, but he suspected it could have been endometriosis, but he didn't think that there was really much more he needed to do at that point, because the next step would have been surgery.
Okay.
So he had said to me, the next step, get the blood work done, see what the hormone levels come back, because that's usually their sort of go-to for checking for polycystic ovaries. So I did have the blood test done. They came back normal, so he said it's likely that you don't have PCOS. However, I have recently learned that just because your hormone levels come back normal doesn't mean that you don't have it. So that's potentially something that's still there. In fact, there are little cysts all over my right ovary. But that hasn't been investigated any further. So at that point, he basically just said, I think you should try and just manage this, because I don't think that we need to do surgery right now. So at this point, we were coming up to just before when COVID was about to hit.
Okay.
So this is only a year, come up on 2 years ago. So yeah, he had basically said, I want to see if you can just manage this for the next few months, come back to me again, and we'll see how you get on. But things were just, I was just at the point of, I need something done right now, because I cannot, one, I can't go on not knowing what this is. And two, I can't go on living with this day in, day out, because it's just so debilitating.
Yeah.
It is affecting my day-to-day life. It's affecting my work. It's affecting me going to do anything with anybody. It's affecting my relationship with my husband. Like, it's just affecting all areas of life. And it does, it, like any chronic illness does, it eats into all areas of your life. And it can be really, really hard, especially when you don't have that diagnosis, to know where to turn or what to do next. So I tried managing it, but to no avail. So I did contact him again and said, look, I really want to do the surgery. And it's so strange thinking back, saying about how much I wanted to do surgery, because you probably thought, why does this girl want to go and do surgery? But at that point, it was desperation. It was just, I want to know, because at least if I have the surgery, I have an answer. Whether it's that I do have it, or I have something else, or they find nothing, at least I know. So he did agree. However, because COVID had hit, that was March time, he basically told me I had to wait again. So it was a case of give it 6 months, see if COVID calms down, and get back in touch with me, and we'll see if we can get you booked in.
Yeah.
So yeah, 6 months went, and that was 6 more painful periods and 6 more months of complete agony. The one thing I have to say about COVID for me was working from home was just such a saving grace, because not having to get myself up to go into the office every single day, being able to sit with a hot water bottle on my tummy all day, that was the only thing I think that probably got me through, because at this point everything was just so painful that I probably couldn't have done 6 more months of actually having to get up and go into work every day.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talking a lot about the pain. Can you, for all the ladies out there, because I don't know how to explain that sort of pain to men, how would you explain the type of pain you have? Because all women, well, 90% women know about period pains. Like, it's painful. It can be like, oh geez.
Yeah.
It can also be debilitating for some of us, where we can't move for that whole day, 3 days for some of us. How would you explain the pain to another woman?
So first of all, anything above discomfort and slight pain isn't normal. So if you are experiencing a lot of pain that's affecting your daily activities, or you can't get out of bed, then that is not normal, and you need to get it checked out. Nobody should be in excruciating pain on their period and it's not normal and it's not unlucky, there is something else that's at play. So the type of pain depends on the time of the month for me. So whenever I would be ovulating, it's a very stabby, sharp shooting pain, very low down. Also a lot of pain on the back passage and a lot of pain just shooting straight through. And I know that's something that's very common. I know we'll come on to it, but for me, the endometriosis affected my bowel quite heavily. So it was all linked into that. So different types of endometriosis will have different types of pain. So I think I mentioned earlier, thoracic endometriosis is whenever the tissue can grow on or around your lungs. So that can cause a lot of pain with breathing and, you know, just anything around that area, chest pain. I also had endometriosis on my appendix. So I had a lot of right side intense pain that, again, I would never have put down to my appendix. So when it comes to the actual period, it is just the intense cramps, the contraction feeling, it's just so hard to describe because it's any type of pain you can think of combined into one. It's just dull, achy, sharp, knife-like. It's just burning. It's just always there. And it's just, you know, all of a sudden you'll have a wave of intense shooting pains and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing that's triggering it. It's just your body is screaming at you.
Everything rolled into one kind of thing.
Yeah.
And just going to sound silly, but to clarify, when she says the back passage, she means the rectum, your bottom area, basically. I've said that word before and confused somebody, so I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, so we've been told to wait 6 months, see where COVID's at. What happens next? Because obviously COVID continued. So how long for you did it go on for before something was actually done?
So COVID did continue, yes. I did reach out to the consultant again in September time because, as I mentioned, it's just so painful at this point. And I touch base with him, see where things are at, see if there's any possibility of getting me scheduled in. And luckily enough, he could fit me in October. So it was a fairly quick turnaround. And I guess this is kind of one of the benefits of going private. So I was booked in for surgery on the 16th of October.
Okay, yeah.
2020.
Just over a year ago, yeah.
It's just over a year ago. And this was supposed to be just fully exploratory, just going in there, having a look, seeing if they could see anything obvious and, you know, make a plan after that. So went in for the surgery, was in, I think, for a few hours, maybe 2.5 hours-ish. And he came around and spoke to me. Again, this is a benefit that I really found with private healthcare. I did stay overnight and he didn't come around to see me straight after the surgery, which I know happens to a lot of people, where the consultant comes to speak to them straight after when you're still drowsy, you've still got, you know, the drugs in your system and you can't remember what's been said. So I was really lucky in that he came around to me the next morning and he spoke to me and he said, you have a lot of endometriosis. There is a lot in there. So he had removed what he could at the time. So he removed some from my bowel.
Okay.
So it was on my rectum and the bottom of my colon. He did remove some of it, but he couldn't go any further because it was so deep in behind my uterus. Okay. So behind your uterus, sort of tucked in between the back of your uterus and the bottom of your rectum is a space called the pouch of Douglas.
Yep.
So it was the whole way down in the back of my womb, and the whole back of my womb was fused to my rectum. So this is why I was having so much pain with the IBS symptoms, and why I also believe now I had so much pain until early in the colonoscopy, was because everything was just completely fused.
Yeah.
So he had removed some from there. He'd also removed some from my ureters. So they were on the tubes going from my bladder to my kidney. So he removed some from there, and I think he removed a little bit maybe from around one of my ovaries. I can't remember which one, but there wasn't a huge amount on the ovaries, which is a good thing. So he basically said, we need to make a plan. It's looking like it's grade 3 or grade 4 endometriosis, grade 4 being the worst. And it was called, it's rectovaginal endometriosis is the correct term for that whenever it affects your bowel. So he had basically told me the next step would be a second surgery. and it would have to involve a colorectal specialist as well as him. So it would be a joint effort between the two of them. But in the meantime, he wanted to get an MRI done to see if they could see the extent of it, because usually deep endometriosis is visible on scans. So if you have grade 1 endometriosis, it might not show up on scans just because it tends to be more scattered tissue.
Okay.
And just to point out, between grade 1 and grade 4, there is no worsening of pain as such. So you could have grade 1 and be in complete agony, and you could have grade 4 and not have any symptoms. It's just completely dependent on the person. It just depends where it grows, what part of the body it affects. So somebody who has grade 1 isn't any better off than somebody who has grade 4 necessarily. So yes, they did go and do the MRI, and that's when it's discovered that not only did it affect my bowel, my appendix didn't look right. It looked like there was something strange going on. There was a growth on it, and it didn't look healthy, and they weren't too happy about that. So they said that when they did the surgery, they'd also need to look at my appendix because it didn't look very happy. And the chances were they were going to remove it from the second surgery. So I was home recovering and everything, had the MRI, and my next surgery got scheduled in for March of this year, so March 2021. And yeah, so this is not long after I met you, and we were chatting and getting to know each other.
Okay.
So we got that scheduled in, went in and spoke with both the consultants after the surgery. So they had said yes, they were able to get as much of it as they could, because there was a potential for me to go in for that surgery and actually have to get a bowel resection and have a temporary colostomy bag. Now that didn't end up happening, thankfully. So they were able to get away with doing a very small disc resection, which didn't actually involve needing to get a colostomy bag. They were able to cut into the bowel wall small enough that it wouldn't require that. So they cut away as much as they could, removed all the tissue, and yeah, the appendix didn't look right. So they did take it out at that point and send it off for a biopsy, just because it was completely and utterly riddled. They said it was just strange looking.
Right, okay.
So that was sent off for a biopsy. Now it did come back, thankfully, that it was okay. But from speaking with my consultant afterwards, he said there probably was a potential for that to turn into something nasty. So honestly, I am so thankful that I was able to use my private healthcare, because I only got the phone call from the NHS in July, just past, asking me if I wanted to come in for my first consultation for gynecology for my referral in 2019.
Which I kind of get, because obviously COVID really pulled things back. I'm still waiting for appointments from January 2019 or something. Like, I'm still waiting for appointments because they're so lagged up at the minute because of it. And so many people, sadly, in this period of time have lost their lives because they weren't able to get the care they needed to see who they needed. And if they could have afforded private, like, they would have probably still been here, which is really sad. I mean, you know, we can't really blame them because obviously COVID, it was unforeseeable and everything like that. But for those who have managed to get the help they need, like yourself, to find out that if they hadn't, you must be like so relieved and so grateful. It's
so relieved, because even though I would have had that consultation in July, there's, you know, how long would I have been on the waiting list for surgery?
Exactly.
And knowing that I needed the 2 surgeries, you know, how long would it have been after the first one before I got the second one? How long would it have been before they did imaging to see that my appendix was in such a bad state?
Right.
And, you know, again, I kind of think this is why I brought up before about the consultant not doing the MRI for my back, because I still think if he had done that MRI way back in 2016, this could have been found so much sooner.
So can you see endometriosis tissue on MRIs?
You can. So there's it's kind of a grey area, because sometimes it won't show up on MRI. It depends on the type of endometriosis and how deep and infiltrating it is, whether the tissue will show up or not. So for me, because it involved so much of my bowel and behind my uterus, and the way because my uterus is actually retroverted. So normally your uterus should tip forward.
Yes. To
the front of your body, towards your bladder. Mine tips back towards my bowel.
Okay.
So they could see that along with all the endometrial tissue that was behind it, that was attached to the rectum. So it totally depends on where it's growing, what type of endometriosis you have, and what it presents like. So the only thing that they could see from that MRI that, you know, nobody seemed too concerned about was that around the vaginal opening, I had some cysts internally. So there were a bunch of little cysts in there, but they weren't too concerned about those. I wonder if they are contributing to pain as well, because I do get a lot of pain down that area. So to me, that is contributing to something, but it could again just be another symptom of the endometriosis. So it's a really tough journey for anybody who is struggling with the pain, you know. Trying to get that breakthrough to speak to the right people in the first place is so hard. And then once you get that breakthrough, trying to fight to actually get what you need in order to get your diagnosis, because the only way you can actually get a true diagnosis is with surgery. So it's so hard.
Like you said, you didn't get your call for the NHS until July this year. There's a chance they could have done the internal ultrasound and gone, that's that, and you would have never have known.
Yeah.
And it's only because you had this ability from your work to go private and get the care you needed, and for them to actually listen to you, it blows my mind. But I'm also grateful for you that you were able to have that, and, you know, get your second surgery done. So you've had that all done now. You've had the second surgery, as you explained. What's next? So are you pain-free now? Are things improved? You know, what's next down the line for you?
Yeah, so I have had improvement. You know, I'm not pain-free by any stretch, but I have had improvement with my symptoms. So just before my second surgery started, I had begun injections that induced medical menopause.
Okay.
So these are actually injections that are used to treat prostate cancer and breast cancer. So they inject you once a month into your lower abdomen, and it's a tiny little implant that releases a hormone called goserelin.
Okay.
And it induces a medical menopause. So your ovaries shut down, stop working. They are not functioning for as long as you're on this injection. So you can only be on those for a maximum of 12 months, but they recommend only 6 months. So I did take those for 6 months. And the reason for starting before the surgery was to try and help settle things a bit for the surgery, so that they weren't going in there while everything was just, you know, on fire.
Yeah.
So it was to try and sort of help them for going into surgery to be able to get a better view of what was going on, to try and minimize my symptoms as much as possible. So I was on those until June time, I think. So that was my 6 months finished for those. They were not fun. The injection themselves are just horrendous. I've shown you the size of the needle.
You have, yes.
They're big.
Yeah.
They're not enjoyable. I still have scars and bruising from getting them injected. Side effects are menopause. So you get the night sweats, you get the hot flushes, you get the weight gain, you get just all the nasty things that, you know, everyone to me should only go through once in their life. You shouldn't go through this in your 20s. So I chose at the 6 month mark to come off and go natural, to see, one, if things had improved from the surgery, and two, I needed a break. My body I was so sick of hormonal treatments. I just needed a chance to let my body do what it needed to do, because the mental effects that come alongside being on hormonal treatments isn't talked about enough.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time it's played down, but that is what I struggle with the most, was the mental side effects that came along with those hormonal treatments. So I did choose at that point to go natural, and it has taken a few months. It takes up to 3 months for your body to readjust after coming off those injections. So, you know, I didn't have my first period for 3 months after I stopped those, until your body basically gets your ovaries and things going again.
I now remember that. I remember that one.
Yeah.
I remember how that was for you.
Not fun. So they do say whenever you come off something like that, your first period is going to be the worst. And they ain't lying.
No, they definitely weren't lying. Watching you go through that and hearing your messages when you were struggling with it was tough to hear as a friend that you were suffering with all.
It was sore. And even though you're told that that's going to be the most painful, all I could think was the surgery didn't work. It's come back, it's got worse. And I think anybody who has endometriosis probably knows this. You're just constantly on the lookout thinking, is it getting worse? Has it grown somewhere else? What's this new pain? Where has this come from? And I guess it is the same with any chronic illness. You're always so hyper aware of your symptoms and how you feel that you overthink everything. And that's definitely been something for me in the past few months, that I'm trying my hardest to just let my body do what it needs to do and not psychoanalyze everything that's going on with it.
Because you can't see inside, can you? You have to trust your body to be doing what it's doing, because you can't physically see what it's doing. And exactly. It's such a mental mind game. And like you were saying, even especially with your injections, it was affecting your mental health, just the injections alone. And then add to that the mental health from having chronic illnesses, from the journey you've been through and the fighting you've had to do, and then the concern afterwards, like what's happening in here now? Is it going to stay at the level it's at? Is it going to get worse again? Like, it's continuous up here.
It is. It takes its toll. And from my post-op review that I had with my consultant, I did ask him, what's the chances this is going to come back? Because I know that there isn't a cure. All they can do is try and remove as much as they can. And, his response was, it's very likely it's going to come back. So I know a lot of women who it's surgery after surgery, every couple of years, it's another surgery, remove as much as they can, because it's the only way to try and maintain and stay on top of this tissue that just keeps relentlessly growing back and different locations and spreading. And there is a potential, I don't think there's a direct link, but there is a potential for it to turn into something more nasty, which in my case there was the potential for with my appendix. So I am just so thankful that they were able to remove that when they did, and didn't let it sit there for any longer, because they kept saying to me, did you have right-sided pain? Did you feel like you had appendicitis? Because that's what it almost looked like on the MRI, that it looked like you had appendicitis. And I said, honestly, I don't know, because there's so much pain everywhere that I couldn't distinguish that pain from anything else. So it was just, let's just get this out now, because we don't want to cause any more issues down the line, kind of thing. So I'm just really thankful that turned out to not be anything nasty at that point.
Has the conversation been had about hysterectomy?
So they do bring it up. They do talk to you about it, but for me, the first thing they say to you is, do you want to have kids? And our answer was yes, we would want to have kids. So they wouldn't do that at all until it was really absolutely necessary. So I don't think they would really approach that until late 30s, early 40s, depending on if you've had kids by that point or not, and obviously how your symptoms and your condition progresses has a big effect on that too. Because if they suspect you do have adenomyosis and you are 100% certain you do not want kids, you can look at going down that route. But again, it needs to be heavily emphasized that it's not a cure. There is no guarantee that even if they remove that you're going to be pain free, that you're not going to have endo, or even people who have adenomyosis, it can come back in different areas as like endo.
Right.
So it's never a guarantee, and it's something that people really need to heavily think about, because it's not just as simple as removing it and that's it. Potentially you're going to be on HRT for the rest of your life,
right? Or
you're going to have issues with bone density, all this, because you're forcing your body into menopause early whenever you remove if you remove the ovaries along with it.
Right.
You're forcing yourself into an early menopause, and you probably will need to be on HRT. Some people aren't. So my mum had adenomyosis and she had a hysterectomy, and she's not on HRT now.
So is it endo hereditary then?
They haven't determined fully that it's hereditary. I think the reason why is because it's so common. Because it's so common, they don't actually know if it's a direct link between parents and children, or if it's just that it's so common, because it's 1 in 10. 1 in 10 women will have endometriosis.
So why don't we know more about it?
This is the thing. So yeah, as I say, they think there could be a link there, but they can't prove it, because there's potentially coincidence there that just family lines have got it because it's common. But I do believe there is a hereditary link with it, you know, for me and my mum essentially to have gone through exactly the same symptoms, you know, with our periods. And for her to then, again, she didn't know about adenomyosis until I learned about what endometriosis was. And I spoke to her and I said, this fits you so well, because she had fibroids as well. So the reason she actually had her hysterectomy was for fibroids. It wasn't for, you know, them suspecting adenomyosis. It was that they thought that they knew she had fibroids. And it was only whenever they did take the uterus out and they checked, they said, no, you had adenomyosis as well. So, and it was something that she had never heard of in her life until I had brought up endometriosis. So it just goes to show how little it's talked about. Now, thankfully, I'm sure people have probably here listening have maybe seen endometriosis is being talked about more. There's been people on this morning. There's been different broadcasts. I know Endometriosis UK is really trying to push it with even just BBC News. We've had people on discussing it. So it's really good to see that it just seems to be popping up everywhere and it is being talked about more now.
Yeah, I've seen TikToks, I've seen it on Instagram. Celebrities are coming out talking about it now. It's really happening. It's really starting to get awareness out there. And I do hope that people are going to get listened to and things will happen. They hopefully find a way of speeding the system up, because the suffering that people go through, as you know, my periods are absolutely vilely horrendous. And if I wasn't already on the medication I was on for my medical stuff, I'd hate to feel what I would feel. Going back to the whole hysterectomy we were speaking about before, and the fact that you wanted kids, you talked about the possibility of infertility, and I wondered if you were to have to go down the IVF route, would the hormones in IVF trigger your endo? Like, would it make things any worse, or would it actually make it any better?
That is a good question, and the one that I honestly have not got the answer to. So I know from speaking with a consultant that for the first instance, in order to go about getting any fertility support, you have to be trying to conceive for a year before they can actually do anything. So the basic answer that I had been given, you know, whenever it came to that point and I asked them about, is there a possibility of me being infertile, they just said we can't say yes or no, because we don't know. It's something that's so fragile. It can just, you know, you could be absolutely fine and have the worst endometriosis ever, or you could, you know, have the tiniest amount of it growing somewhere and it could just really affect you. So until we try, you know, for that first year, they won't look at any other avenues first. So in regards to how IVF treatment can affect endo, I honestly don't have an answer for that one. But
so coming out of your hospital appointment in A&E where it was suggested, you never went down that alley. You never thought of trying just to soothe yourself.
I think I came out of that so angry for, you know, what she said, and she was so dismissive and just throw out something like that so blasé, just, you know, go have a baby,
especially from a female.
Exactly. And you know, we were in no position at that point, you know, that was just after we got married. And you know, whenever you just got married as well, that's what the first thing everybody's firing at you is, when you're going to have a child, when are you going to get pregnant. And although I didn't know at that point what was wrong, I had so many thoughts in my head where I was thinking, I'm going to have difficulty. This isn't going to be easy for me, because there's something not right.
Yeah.
So it's something that, you know, it is on my mind, and you know, we aren't trying at the moment, but it is something on my mind. And even from going for physio since my surgery for pelvic floor physio, you know, it was mentioned, you know, the best time to try and have a child is straight after surgery, because it's when your body is, you know, there's the least amount of endometriosis in there. And all of a sudden you think that there's this much pressure on you to go, this has to be the right window now, otherwise I'm going to lose it. It's going to grow back and I'm going to be back at square one and I'm going to have trouble and it's going to be just heartbreak. And it's just an awful process to have to think that you've got this window and you have to use it. And it wasn't really something that was talked about beforehand, where I was told, you know, once you have the surgery, that's the best time to try and conceive, because it wasn't a thought in my head at the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I say we're not trying now still, but it's something that I think about going, I feel like a ticking clock. And I am only 26, but they say with the likes of endometriosis, once you're past the age of 30, your chances of conceiving drop considerably. So, I do feel like that clock is ticking at the moment. But
I mean, that's it's the natural one for everybody, that when you get to 30 it goes down and 40 it goes down, but I'm guessing with the endometriosis it takes that percentage even lower.
Yeah, but at least now we know about it, and we know what the plan is, and we don't need to panic because we've had those discussions with the consultant. So whenever that time does come, we do try, we've got potentially a plan there for what would be the next step, and we can get the help that we need to get. So
is there a possibility they can go in again when you're ready and do some clearing out? Is that a possibility that could be had?
Potentially. So for me, I will be having reviews with my consultant. With health insurance and chronic illnesses, they don't really allow you to have consultations unless there's been a significant worsening or a new lot of symptoms that have appeared for you. So for me, it's a case of right now continue to manage the symptoms that I have, because they are more manageable than they were prior to the surgery. But it would be a case of going back to him if anything gets worse, maybe do more imaging, and then from that point make a plan if they need to go back in for surgery again. So it's really just an ongoing thing. And I know this is probably entirely different to the experience of the NHS, but just being able to have contact with him, I have his email, I have his phone number, I can contact him, if I do feel things are getting worse. Even post-surgery I was able to contact him if I thought symptoms were strange. I was getting glands swollen, things like that. So that is such a luxury, being able to just be in touch with your consultant whenever you need to. And that does really put my mind at ease a bit, just knowing that I have that contact there, so I can go directly to him if I feel that anything is getting worse, or if I have any questions. His inbox is always open for me.
Whereas on the NHS you would have to wait for every referral.
Exactly.
So there is a massive difference there. It's a shame that private healthcare is so expensive. That's for sure.
It is.
Speaking to women out there who are suffering with pain and that lot, what would you say to them to do? Like, what would be your advice?
So because it takes so long to get down the right avenue, just go to your doctor. And if you get knocked back, you just have to keep advocating for yourself, because you will get knocked back. You will be treated like it's all in your head, that you're making it sound worse than it is, that it's just bad periods, it's just IBS. If you feel in yourself that there is something not right, trust your gut instinct, because although I doubted myself so many times along the way and thought, this is in my head, I'm making this up, there's nothing actually wrong with me, in my gut I was still convinced there was something there. And once you finally get down the right route and you get to hear that word and you're told what it is, it's such a relief. Not because you've got a condition now, but because you've got a name to put to it. You've got a valid reason for why you're feeling how you're feeling. And it doesn't fix anything, but just knowing that you can say, this is what I have, it's like a switch is flipped in your head, and all of a sudden it's like everything makes sense.
Validity means everything.
It does.
To us, it really does, because like you said, if you'd stuck with the IBS, it's such a wide range thing, and people just go, oh, you just got IBS, like get on with it kind of thing. And it wasn't just IBS, it was endometriosis, which is an excruciating condition that causes so many problems. So getting your diagnosis, it gave you validity, and it's sad that we have to have validity to be taken seriously. And I think that's why we fight so hard for our diagnoses.
It is.
But it's absolutely a great piece of advice. It really is.
Yeah. So just keep fighting. And now, knowing the term endometriosis, read about it. Read and bring it up with your GP, because again, if I hadn't mentioned the word endometriosis to my GP, that wouldn't have gone any further. I brought it up with her. It didn't just come out of her mouth. It was something that I said, could this be what it is? So don't be afraid to suggest to your GP or whoever it is that you're speaking to, don't be afraid to suggest that it is endometriosis, because so many times it's overlooked.
Yeah.
And read about the symptoms, read about everything you can. I spent hours watching YouTube videos from medical YouTube videos, reading medical journals, just educate yourself as much as you can, read books, and just keep fighting for yourself. It's the only thing you can do.
And keep rereading. Don't think you've seen it all, because trust me, new textbooks, new medical papers come out all the time. Don't ever stop. Every couple of months, go back, re-Google, recheck, because you'd be surprised what you'll find on the internet after a few months. I can't find documents I found last year anymore because it's all replaced. We've been looking. But yeah. So at the end of the interview, we like to ask if there's any myths that you found about your conditions. So did you manage to find any?
Yeah, so I think we've probably kind of covered it already, but painful, excruciating periods are not normal. So it doesn't specifically relate to endometriosis. It could be any number of conditions involving the reproductive organs, but excruciating, painful periods are not normal. So if you are experiencing that, please go and see a GP, start the process, because as you've heard, it can take so long. The earlier you can do that, the sooner things will start to fall into place for you.
That's fantastic. Bit of information, it really is. And it does, I've Googled it before and asked if my periods are normal, and found that yes, lots of women suffer with extremely painful periods. It is normal. And to find out, I found out beginning last year, it wasn't endometriosis that actually came up in my doctor's appointment, as you know, beginning last year, but COVID has shut all that down. So it's already been a long period for me, but we'll see. As we like to do with everybody we interview, we ask them to share a charity of their choice. It's not to force anyone to send a donation. It's there in case you go, do you know what, I really want to help this condition. And so we put a charity out of the choice of the person we're interviewing. And today, Hayley, which charity would you like to put out there today?
So it was Endometriosis UK, and they do so much in terms of just trying to raise awareness, and they're trying to help improve research. You know, there's actually a lot of research trials that are going on at the moment for endometriosis or are coming up. So feel free to just have a Google for endometriosis trials if you're interested in the different approaches they're looking for treatments. But yeah, they've been great in terms of actually just raising awareness. As I mentioned, they've organised the talks on This Morning, on BBC News, and a lot of the things that you see on social media are backed by Endometriosis UK. So they're doing a really good job the past year or two of actually just getting the name out there and making it known.
Which is super important. It really is with all conditions. And as always, your social media, would you like to share them?
Yes, so my social media will be in the description box down below if you're on YouTube, and if you're listening on any other podcast supplier, then you'll be able to find my details on the website. So they'll be up there, and you can go stalk my Instagram if you want to.
We love giving stalking materials.
Okay.
At the end of every interview, the person we're interviewing normally leaves. Obviously, Hayley being the co-host, she can't go anywhere, but we do like to share at the end a spoonful of knowledge, and if we can take it from the interview we've just had, then we really do try to. And today we'd like to give you our spoonful of knowledge, and it will be to advocate for yourself. As Hayley has said today, you know how important it is to not give up. If you really think that the diagnosis that you've been given is not the correct one for you, and you feel like you've not been listened to, find as much information on the conditions you think it could possibly be. Yes, it does sometimes frustrate the doctors, but you know, this is your health that you're fighting for, you know, not for the doctor's sanity of going, oh my God, stop Googling, you know, take evidence in, take printouts in, and just make them listen to you. Don't give up. If you need to switch to another doctor, do that. But don't give up on yourself. Just because they keep turning you down doesn't mean that they're right and you're wrong.
Exactly. Couldn't put it better myself.
But having said that, I think that's all we've got for today. Hayley, thank you ever so much. I know that cannot have been easy, and having done it myself, I know that there must have been things that you remembered going through this that you'd forgotten about, and as always, you know that I'm here if you ever need to talk.
Yeah.
yeah, really appreciate you being really open and raw today.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate just the opportunity to get to talk about it all. It's been a long time that I've just started from the very beginning and gone the whole way through. And if somebody can even relate to one part of that story and it sparks something for them, then that just means so much, because it's all part of the raising awareness and just educating people. So thank you for the platform to be able to do that.
Well, thank you for the platform for you to be able to do that too. So on that note, thank you ever so much for tuning in today. We really do appreciate it, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Yeah. Speak soon.
Bye.
Bye.